Hello, my name is Will. I'm a werewolf, and hopefully you've listened to a few of the videos on this YouTube channel. I've got back in contact with Louis after the debacle of what he thought was a good idea. It wasn't particularly a good idea. If you like these stories, just for being story's sake, that's cool. www.werewolf.host is the website if you want to talk to me. Please like and subscribe on this YouTube channel if you want, okay? I'm currently back in my hometown, and I am staying at my address. It's my address and art studio. And today I'm going to tell a story about my little slave that I have. He looks after my art studio for me, and it's just an introduction to him. I always wanted like the ego that you get out of the films, so I kind of bet you're wondering how on earth I could leave my art studio to do my everyday stuff. I mean, if you've listened to some of the other things, you know that I like to play around with life. If you're not thinking about that, well, I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's an important thing and it's a great story. I had a wonderful art installation in my permanent residence. It was important to maintain it and look after it. Those pieces that needed some looking after, they're mainly alive, so shit needed to be done when I was away. Literally shit would have to be shifted and food would have to be given to the artwork, if it was to be maintained. Living art was a pain in the arse, really, but I found the perfect person to do the job while I was away. His name was Malcolm, and he was my evil scientist helper. The Igor of all those Frankenstein and Dracula movies of the 50s, but this guy was something even better. He was a high-level loser needing life validation and something to live for, and I gave him that. Malcolm. What a fucking name. It even means a devotee of God, and I was the man's God, and he is devoted to me. Let me describe this guy. He was well over 6'4", but he had that thing that some tall men do, the constant hunch in their spine, trying to make themselves appear a lot smaller than they really are. He had shoulder-length rusty ginger greasy hair. His skin is pallid, and he has acne and acne scars, and those are, of the squeezer. He didn't really have any idea of personal hygiene. However, I have taught him, and he is getting better. He wears glasses, or he wore glasses, but they were no ordinary glasses. They were those thick bottle-bottom motherfuckers that are so heavy on the head that the steel aviator frames had created a permanent little ridge step on the bridge of his nose. They weighed so much that they spent a lot of time travelling down that nose to the tip. And they were constantly on the move, and they were constantly pushed back to that groove in his head. Oh, and surprisingly, they weren't held together by tape. A shocker, that's what you expected. No, these poor frames had been sat on and squished underneath his arse and body so many times that they were warped. So warped that they were the only thing that you could look at on his head because they were so out of shape. His nose is bulbous and full of blackheads, and that's just from that lack of washing thing mixed with overzealous sebum, which gingers have. He was a heavy drinker when I met him, but I soon beat that shit out of him because he couldn't really function as a caretaker if he was drunk all the time. I replaced his love of whiskey with a love of cocaine, which means he now needs me to fulfill his habit. He will never let me down for many reasons, but the main one I think is that he's an addict to my drugs. This change in drug of choice means that his red and hemorrhage vessels in his nose are fading and being replaced with the sunken bulbous eyes of the coke fiend. He looks young for a man in his early 30s with his acne and his baby face, so what he's done is he tried to grow a moustache and beard. I have to reiterate, he has tried to grow. It makes him look well. It makes him look like he's tried to grow a beard. The shame of it is that he could actually be quite a good-looking guy if he had any ability to groom and present himself. To add to this lack of sexiness, he has big red blemishes on either side of his nose. He was diagnosed with eczema, and then when I brought home a doctor for dinner, And before I ate him, the guy looked at it and he found out that what he actually had was athlete's foot on the face. He had foot fungus on his face. The sad thing was that Malcolm was feeding that fungus with moisturiser. He thought that was treating his eczema. No, he was feeding it. His physique is strange as well. He's tall and gangly with a pot belly. His limbs were like bits of string, and his knuckles, due to his posture, were actually hung down around by his knees. I mean, he looked like a cartoon character. He was a hunchback of sorts. He didn't really have like the lump, but was hunched. He had kyphosis of the upper spine, so he was a hunchback. I mean, I always really wanted a hunchback to be like the Igors of literature, you know. And then to match this, he's got a huge sway in his back just above his hips, making his spine look like a squished S from the side. Kyphosis at the top and lordosis at the bottom. The lordosis also promoted the little pot belly he had, making it stick forward in front of the man. He looks very much like a chimp in his upper body, and it's a very strange contrast to the pair of longest legs that you've ever seen on a man at the bottom. Honestly, he looks like he stood on stilts, as his shins just seem overly long. Oh, and he had fuck off huge feet to add to this grotesque nature. He was a size 18. Oh, and it's not true that they say about men with enormous feet, they don't always have a huge cock. He really did not. It was like a little button mushroom. I mean, tiny. So small, and he did no pubic grooming when I met him, so the poor little thing was lost deep in the shag pile of that red, hairy, messy mass of pubes. He also, when I met him, had no idea of how to dress. We had to change that. The poor fucker had socks and sandals the first time I met him. Socks and fucking sandals. Not only socks and sandals, but white socks and fucking sandals. Well, let's say they should have been white socks. They were no longer white. He had his dirty socked massive feet in the biggest pair of what we would call Jesus sandals. You know, we would call them Jesus sandals as a child. I don't know why. Did Jesus wear sandals? I'm not sure. I mean, a herd of fucking cows must have died to make these fuckers. Big brown leather sandals with big fucking brass buckles. Yeesh. I had to get him some trousers, because I think to get trousers to fit properly, we would have to get them tailored for him, and we did. I mean, when I met him, it's not a thing he would ever consider, so his grey nylon Farah trousers, grey nylon Farahs, terminated well above his ankles. These pants were not, as we would say as kids, half-mast, but they were like at 3/4 length. I mean, it was a look. A real look. Oh, and he wore over baggy shirts as a rule to try and hide the body beneath them, and it did not work. And we've not finished describing this unfortunate fuck. He had several nervous tics that ruled his life. There was the constant push of the glasses up the nose, even when they'd not slipped, and he was incredibly blinky. I had to stop the third one because it was very sort of not nice. That would be his hands would always be down the front of his trousers having a bit of a rummage. We had to stop that one because it made me feel uncomfortable when we were speaking. Also, he would serve me food. Let's finish it with the final straws that the awful God had believed and prostrated in the front of him. He had a lisp, and on top of that, a high, effeminate voice. Do you know what? He was fucking perfect for me. The perfect guy to manipulate by the perfect God. Me. He worshipped at the altar of will and was loyal and particularly good at his job. So a slave to me he was. On top of all these things, I had found his major addiction, and I also had the hard drives that were full of the kiddie porn that he had a heroic tendency for. Usually he would have just been fucking a statistic if I'd have found this, but watching a man with this much self-loathing was a beautiful thing in itself. I couldn't kill him. He hated himself, and I could make him feel even worse about himself by having this power over his head. He was trapped in this horror of a life. He felt he could never commit suicide, as he knew, that I would release his hours of horribleness to the public. He would then have the embarrassment of his old mum dealing with it. He was the perfect slave. It was great. I could never torture someone as well as this man could torture himself. It was a beautiful thing to be part of. I had discovered him outside a primary school in Manchester. He was a perverted bastard, standing there in the bushes at the edge of the play area, bent at the hips and sweating, his right hand in the pocket of his trousers in perpetual locomotion as he studied the youngsters before him. It was sheer luck that I'd found him. I mean, he was well hidden. I was hungry and looking for a small snack of my own. As I turned the corner to the fence play area, ready to take a small treat, I'd been shocked to see the brown parka jacket in amongst the trees. My posit had laughed, and we both sensed the sexual excitement flowing in waves off the man's body as he masturbated furiously in hiding from the children. I stood and waited for some time as he pounded on himself. I felt it would have been rude not to let him finish. I mean, blue balls are very uncomfy for most people. After a few more strokes, I sensed his bodily sort of release as he ejaculated, and the horror and disgust in himself that followed this act. This was far too interesting to walk away from or just kill. I mean, I just had to know more. He had just had an orgasm and now was disgusted with himself for that orgasm. I mean, orgasms are fucking awesome. They're one of my favourite things. I had to know more. This guy was a proper sick fucker in his head, and I love sick fuckers, especially those who hate themselves for being a sick fucker. After he finished his bodily eruptions, he sank to his knees and slowly slunk onto the floor. He now lay there in a fetal position. He just lay in the mud under the Leyland trees of the hedge and started to sob and cry, his body shaking. The posit, my werewolf soul, looked up at me. If you don't know about my werewolf soul by now, please go and listen to other things or go to the website. The posit looked up at me and pointed at the guy. What the fuck is this guy's problem? He's not hurt anyone. He's just had a wank, he posited into my mind. It does not make you think, okay, that the thing that has just taken place, is it something wrong? Does it make you think if it's okay? I mean, this grown man has just had a wank over prepubescent children. I looked over his shoulder into the playground, and the kids looked to be somewhere between 6 and maybe 10. My belly rumbled. I was fucking hungry. Was it better that I wanted to eat them, or was it better that he wanted to fuck them? It was a new question in my mind, and I had to have it answered. I mean, had he really caused any harm to the children? Whoa, bear with me. He had not assaulted them, or even revealed himself or his intentions to them. They had no clue about him, so had he in fact caused them any harm? Obviously, it would have been a very different thing if he exposed himself or actually touched a child. Was having a simple wank over a situation without any engagement with the kids really a negative thing? Maybe this way he would never actually hurt a child or touch a child. Maybe this was his way of dealing with the issues and never harming the kid themselves. A little bit of deep philosophy that I had not considered, although I still would torture the fuck out of the perv. I shared these thoughts with the posit. The posit was his usual straightforward self. I could not give a fuck, to be honest, Fen. Fuck him or eat him, it's all okay with me. It's what he feels about the situation that is the interesting thing to me. I don't even want to kill this cunt. I want to see what and why, what makes him feel this way. Okay. I smiled and wandered over to the prostrate man and stood over him as he cried in his hands. I stood there for a while thinking that he would notice me at some point. He did not. I was starting to get bored. I was getting ADHD'd and started to whistle and look around the area to make sure that we're not being watched. Still nothing from the broken man before me. "What you doing, mister?" I asked in my stupid childish voice. The man stopped and became silent, but did not look up from his hands that he held in front of his face. He was actually doing very well, as I noticed his internal panic, but no evidence of it on the surface. I poked him with the toe of my boot. "What are you doing, mister?" I asked again, but this time not adding my childish twang to the question. He slowly turned towards me. His mopey wet eyes were full of fear and revulsion. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm really sorry." For what, I asked. You were just having a wank over some kids, weren't you? What's wrong with that? It's not like you actually had a wank over kids, is it? He turned from his muddy spot to look at me. I think he thought I was playing with him at this point, which I kind of was. Please don't get the police involved. I have money. I will pay you not to say anything, he begged. I smiled at him. I don't want your money. Let's say I want your time and effort. Within a few weeks, he had sold his house and added his funds to my not inconsiderable wealth and moved it sort of in with me to my warehouse flat. I made sure he had his own space and that I did not need to see him unless I chose to. I cleaned him up, taught him how to dress and take care of himself. I got him into the gym and got him to train and get his posture to kind of near human. I taught him body language methods and how to present as a confidence person. I took him to the best doctors, physios, and showed him how to live a life well and trick all into thinking that he was a decent chap. I got him the eye surgery, you know, that laser thing that would allow him to throw his big fuck-off thick glasses away. I then could satiate his needs by taking him to the local whorehouses where he could pick the youngest of what was on offer, you know, just to satiate his needs without defiling any of the youngsters. Laughingly, he began to think that we were friends. He thought that I cared in a strange way. Not at all. I needed him to be the man that I made. I needed him to serve my needs as I wanted. I introduced him to my ways and my works of art. As a blackmail object, I have his collections of kiddie porn and make sure that he will never ever wipe the evidence from the world of his perverse and sinful pleasures. I mean, I could kill him and or destroy his life in so many easy ways if he did not follow my instructions. He had to worship me and put up with anything that I, brought down upon him. I was a beneficent God, though. He did a great job for a while. Yeah. The next story is particularly gross. It's about me doing a piece of artwork. I don't think it's particularly gross, but Louis says that it's very disturbing. If you're disturbed, then I do apologise for disturbing you. Bye.